Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Hoven, your host of the Difference Makers podcast. This is a place where people come together that are making a difference for those who want to make a difference. And that's you. We're bringing thought leaders together in a sense of fusion where ideas and concepts and personalities are all driven together into one place at one time. And this is no different. In this episode, you're going to see cool things from cool people making a difference. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. And it's a pleasure for me as your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, to share great stories with great people and then bring them to you. And today is no different. Now, you're going to hear from someone who's making a difference in the lives of people after having gone through an incredibly arduous journey and a difficult task that none of us would want to undertake. And we're going to go through that more. So as a little teaser, that's what I gave you. But here's what I'm going to ask that you do. If you like our show in general, if you love this show, which I think you will, please like, subscribe, hit that heart button, do all those things that let people know that this is a legit podcast where they can get things, where they can help not only make a difference in someone else's lives, but maybe their lives can be different as well from listening to these folks. So that being said, our little shameless plug for our own show, I want to now move on to our guest, Miss Risa August. And Risa's story is amazing. Please, please, please connect with her. You're going to feel her energy. She and I have been talking for a few minutes before here, and what she's going to tell you, I think it's going to be, most of you are going to go like, wow, how did she do what she's done? So we're going to hear her story. We're going to take her journey with her, and then we're going to talk about how you can apply this in your life as well. So Risa, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Dr. Jim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here today.
Absolutely. And you know what? I don't know if I've ever known someone who could say those words more truly, because most people say they're grateful to be here for the show today, right? But in your case, I think you are actually grateful to be here on our planet, living your life, helping people the way that you are, right?
I am, yes, yes, and a better version of myself at that.
Yes. And so now let's lift up the veil of kind of how I've been teasing that a little bit. You've come from a brain tumor. You've come through that. And so can you please tell us a little bit about your story and where you came from, how you got this medical diagnosis, what happened, and the journey that that took you on? It's fascinating to me.
Sure, yes. Well, it all began in, I'll say 2010. I completed my first Ironman race, feeling great about myself. Fast forward a year to 2011, suddenly um, things started shifting in my body, things I couldn't explain. And I was struggling with my training and all the intense kind of fitness stuff and outdoor stuff I love to do. And so I started seeing doctors to tell, to just let them know, like, I think there's something going on in my body. Can we get it checked out? And all my labs and blood work kept coming back fine. And uh, over a 7-year span, I kept being told, oh, you're fine. We're not worried. Your blood work's fine. Your labs are fine. And you're an athlete, so we're not concerned. And I would say, well, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? There were changes like significant weight gain, changes in hair growth, changes in joint pain and bone structure, and fatigue. Things I just couldn't. They weren't really defined, and they can be explained away by so many other things.
Especially your level of fitness, your age, all that, none of that made sense.
Right, right. That's how I felt. And so I kept being dismissed and dismissed. And um, fast forward to 2017, I barely finished Ironman Boulder. And after that, I couldn't get off the couch. And I started looking at adrenal fatigue and HPA axis stuff and, doing as much research as I can. I'm very proactive in, my approach to life and, and taking responsibility for how I am in the world. So I was doing the research, and I'd say it took another year to 2018. I kept going back to my doctor, which was very unusual for me. I have a very holistic approach to life. I live more naturally, if you will, and eat really well and take care of myself. And so I don't go to doctors if I don't have to.
Mhm.
And I kept going back to the doctor and I kept saying, I am having severe, severe headaches. I'm barely getting 2 hours of sleep a night. Can we get an MRI? And she said, "Oh, I don't think you need one. You're fine. Your labs are fine. I don't, maybe you're overtraining, drinking too much or not drinking enough water. We always hear that in Colorado, like, oh, drink more water if you have a headache." And I said, no, something's off here. And I said, I'd really like the MRI. And she said, no, I don't think you need one. You're an athlete. I'm not worried. And besides, they're very expensive. And I almost said, okay. I almost like the whole 7 years that went by where I kept just saying, okay, okay, if you say so. There was something in me that day. It's like finding my voice for the first time. And I said, order me the MRI. That's my decision. And 1 week later, I had an email from her with, it was one sentence I remember loud and clear. You have an enlarged pituitary, go see an endocrinologist. I
Wait,
had
not come back and see me. Let's talk about it. Did
no,
that? I just got to ask. I'm sorry to interrupt your flow here. It blows my mind, and maybe this has been part of your path from this, when doctors don't listen to patients. And we're trained. I know when I went through my chiropractic training, we're trained to use all of these different tools to tell us, along with the patient's story, their history, to come up with a diagnosis and then to follow a plan. But when the plan doesn't get the results that we're hoping, then we don't keep digging into the plan. We start sending out to other people, trying other things. I'm blown away by 7 years, a 7 year run of going back to a doctor or doctors and not changing the plan because you're an athletic young female that overall should be healthy, but you're not. Like that, I I'm stuck by that. So did you when you got that diagnosis from the MRI, did you go back to the doctor or did you say, look, obviously this is not a good relationship, I need to find a new doctor? Did the doctor go, "Ooh, man, this is this isn't going to work"? What happened there?
oh, I had a lot of anger in the beginning that I had to work through. And I drafted several scathing letters and emails that I never sent. And essentially, I just fired her as my doctor. I never went back or spoke with her again. Um, and so there's more to that story as well. But initially, I was extremely angry.
And so once you got through that, you went to an endocrinologist. From there, did things seem to make sense for you, Rissa, where it was like, oh, okay, here's where we go. Like how do you feel when you're told you have a brain tumor, a pituitary tumor? And by the way, for the people that don't know, pituitary is so involved in hormonal regulation and all these kinds of things. So everything that you're saying, weight gain, headache, lack of sleep, all of these things tie into what you were calling the HPA axis and all these things, right? So, I mean, I could see why you were enraged. I could get it. Like, how could I know more than you do? You know what I mean? When you're doing the research. But once you got into that endocrine specialty care, were you scared? Were you worried about losing your life? How was the interaction there? Like, give us that part of the story.
Well, there's pre-diagnosis Rissa and there's post-diagnosis Rissa. And
Mm.
um, so when I was diagnosed, I was still in the pre-diagnosis Rissa place. I very driven, very motivated, perfectionist, um, very intense, also, and very proactive and very, I don't have time for this. I have my life to do. Let's just get this over with. I don't know what I'm about to hear. I had no idea what an endocrinologist actually was. And I thought, oh, is this cancer? And I didn't know. There wasn't a lot of, there's not a lot of information out there about, well, first of all, I didn't know what a pituitary tumor was because I was told I had an enlarged pituitary. So I didn't know what that meant. Doing research, there wasn't a lot of information. And I didn't know about the disease that was associated with my tumor at that point yet either. So to me, it was just like, oh God, like I don't need this right now. Kind of that, like I said, pre-diagnosis, Risa. And so suddenly I'm sitting in the endocrinologist office, and she was so different from most of the doctors I have experienced. Super compassionate, um, very coactive in her approach. And but I just remember staring at my skull on the screen, and you can see the two eyeballs, and there's this giant gray blob crammed in between them. And she looked at me with concern and said, "This has got to come out. And furthermore, I know I'm 99% sure I know what you have, and it'll take one test to confirm it." And so at that point, I was like, wait, what? So as the appointment went on, I learned that I had a macro adenoma, which is a tumor. It was slightly larger than a golf ball, crammed in between my eyeballs and at the base of my brain. And then I learned I had a disease called acromegaly, which is essentially it's excessive amounts of growth hormone being dumped into your body in an unhealthy way. And eventually, if it's untreated, it's terminal. Most people die from an enlarged heart or complications to that excessive amounts of growth hormone. And so that explained everything. And I remember not feeling like, not it didn't sink in like, oh, I have to have brain surgery. And what sunk in was I knew something was wrong. Like it
Yeah.
was the validation that meant the most to me in that moment.
And so when you went through, you decide that surgery is the way to go. Everyone knows, and you all concur, that's where you go. You do the brain surgery. Was it before the brain surgery or after, where what you're calling post-diagnosis, Rissa, comes into play, where now you have a different view? I don't know what that view is yet. You haven't shared what the post-Rissa, life philosophy is, but when exactly did that shift take place?
Well, I was still in, I'd say it took about 6 months post surgery, when I realized my life was never going to be the same. I I thought I would get this tumor out. Okay, let's tackle this disease. What has to happen? Well, it turns out they couldn't get the entire tumor. There's some of it wrapped around my carotid artery and then also too close to my optic nerve. And I learned they strongly encouraged radiation treatment, which was a huge and extremely difficult decision for me to make. And then I learned further that I had to be on medications um, to help try to shrink the tumor and also regulate the growth hormone being dumped into my body. And for someone who never even took ibuprofen, um, I just felt like I was being punked from the universe or something.
And so interesting, that a next kind of step I want to take in this is, all this is happening. You're a fiercely, as you self-describes, fiercely independent, motivated, driven, young lady. I don't know how old you were at that time, but you were right in the prime of your training career, doing, these triathlons and marathons, all these kinds of things. When you hear this, whether it was right at the pre-diagnosis Rissa or the post-diagnosis Rissa, did you have a large team, a support team outside of your medical providers with family, friends, the training community? Was there something here? Did you go or did you withdraw and go like, hey, I'm going to handle this on my own? What did you do? And maybe it was different pre versus post-diagnosis Rissa.
That's a great question. I didn't have a huge support team outside of out like not initially. It's a complex disease and it's hard to understand, and I think people didn't understand it. And people, what I noticed, they're afraid to ask. And and so there was the challenge of that. There was also old Rissa, pre-diagnosed Rissa trying to keep up the facade of, oh no, I'm still as sharp as I used to be. I'm still the person that can do it all. And I was having serious cognitive issues, memory issues, and then physically I was annihilated. But I kept trying to show up with in the manner of like who I was. I think I wanted to prove that this isn't going to get me. This isn't, and yes, I can still be that person. But again, about 6 months in, when I was getting through radiation treatments, I was like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to get back to her. So now the grieving process begins.
Man, I want to hear more about the grieving process as we're at this point, because I think so many people, we've just had at our firm, we've had someone lose someone very close to them, and there's a grieving process with that. I've gone through the loss of a son, 2.5 years ago, grieving process through that. There's all these reasons people grieve, but there's a grieving process for yourself when you don't know if you're going to make it, if you don't know if you're ever going to get back to where you were. What was when you realized that was the grieving process? Was that again an internal thing, or did you now have to reach out to others to help you offset that grieving? And how did you get through that?
Yes. Initially, I wanted to do it all on my own. I'm a very private person, and grew up with my own ideas of weakness and how it relates to emotions and what strength means. And so I had to, I was always the strong person. And I used to like to brag about being able to compartmentalize my feelings and emotions,
Like a
which is
true rugged athlete.
right, which is not necessarily something to brag about. But and so it was a process, and slowly I started letting people in, and being more open to healing um and what was possible. And so for a while I was really focused on what, like, okay, who I no longer was and what I can't do. And something in me sparked, I talk about it a lot. It was this moment I was sitting on my living room sofa for yet another day of not leaving the house in these worn out, tattered gray sweatpants that should have been burned. And I remember saying, this is no way to live. And so I started shift. That was the point I shifted. I still get a little emotional thinking about it, but that was the point I decided to live. I chose to live. And I started focusing on what I could do, what was possible. And like, okay, I might not be out there doing Ironman races anymore, but what can I do? And let me tell you, my life has been so full since that decision, that conscious decision and choice to live.
Wow, that's so good. In fact, that brings me to something that you have done. You've written a book, and you have the book sitting next to you. And it's so cool because we'll talk more about the book, but can you describe Like when I look at it, I love this. It's The Road Unpaved is the name of the book, but I love this little tagline: border to border with a brain tumor and a bike. So I wanted to hear your story about the tumor and where you got and kind of go A to Z. And now I want to come back and focus on how does this action step come into play where you're going to take a bike ride, an extensive bike ride with a brain tumor. Give me and us the thought behind that and where that came from.
Yes, well, that same day, sitting on that couch in those tattered gray sweatpants, I was like, okay, life starts now. Like it's now. And I thought, I pulled out my bucket list. Like, okay, there are so many things I have been wanting to do in my life that I've put on hold, or, oh, I'll try someday, or I'll do that someday. And now, I no longer potentially had that luxury. And that's where I found the gift in this. And so one of those bucket list items were riding my bike across country, coast to coast. And so I just for the fun of it, I looked at some coast to coast bike tours, and I didn't necessarily love any of them. And then I found the Pacific Coast bike tour, from Canada to Mexico down the Pacific Coast. And I just knew, and I said, that's the one. And on that day, that moment, I signed up for this 1,800-mile bike tour down the coast. I didn't know how on earth. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't even walk to my mailbox. I had no idea how I was going to get on my bike at the Canadian and US border in 14 months. But that didn't matter. It felt like I had something to live for
And
now.
so what was it then? How did you get yourself to the point where you became ready? Like, how did you get battle hardened from basically giving up? I mean, you had the athlete's mentality, you have this new post diagnosis, Risa, also, you have the moment, the flash moment, or the aha moment. I'm going to live my life. But now there's still a training process that has to come into play. And we don't know that everything's balanced yet, right? I mean, with your growth hormone levels and all the other hormone levels along that are going to allow you to ride this 1,800 miles. So, what was the process? How was the planning? Did you get coaches involved? How did you go from on the couch, as athletes like to say, to ready for an 1,800-mile ride?
Well, I got off the couch. That was my first step. And then I got out of those tattered gray sweatpants and threw them away. And and then I actually, that's when I dove into Gestalt coaching program, a 24-month certification program, um, uh, for this holistic approach to healing. And then I started painting, which I'm not an artist. And suddenly I'm selling art pieces around the world. And then I eventually made it to my mailbox. And then eventually got on my bike for 5 minutes on the trainer in the basement. And then I remember riding outside for the first time 8 miles, which was a huge deal. Even though you're talking to someone who used to do 65 miles for fun on the weekends, but I got out for 8 miles, and then I worked my way up to a 100-mile century ride. And it was truly a step-by-step process. And I created a mantra for myself. I took the word can because I wasn't focusing on can't anymore. I was focusing on can, and I took each letter from the word can and I created a mantra: capable, able, now, can. What am I capable and able to do now in this moment? And like I said, the first thing was getting off that couch.
That's so amazing. I love that. So take your can't, drop the T, capable, able, now. What can I do right now that I'm capable and able to? That is brilliant. That is brilliant. And so, so far, I hear it was all, internal to external from you. Did you have to bring in other people to train with because when you do these rides, I know sometimes they'll go like, there's a guy named Jerry Schimmel here from Colorado. He's the voice of the Rockies. He's become a friend of ours. and he's done these coast to coast rides. I think it's called the Ram ride or something along those lines. And he's done that. And there's a thing, right? Like you have to mesocycle and create all these training programs and all that to do this. What I'm hearing you right now is it's just grit day by day, do your can training and your mantra. Did it end up, did that take you all the way across the finish line on this thing?
My goodness. Yeah, I mean, of course there were ups and downs, so to speak. I remember when I had brain surgery, they damaged part of my pituitary, and so it caused a sodium imbalance in my body, and so that was an added layer to you know, making sure I'm not overhydrating or underhydrating, which is a concern for every athlete or everyone out there in different kinds of weather. But for me, it was like magnified times 10. So I could easily stroke much easier than someone else who didn't have a damaged pituitary. And so I started studying all that, more of like how my body was responding to water and hydrating and different kinds of foods and supplements that I used to eat. And I started attending a lot of like endocrinology conferences and things to educate myself more on understanding our whole endocrine system and how much the pituitary actually controls in our bodies. And I started learning so much. And I remember sitting in on a session, and there was a doctor and who was leading the session, and it was about the damaged pituitary, and it caused this disease. It caused this. It's not a disease. It's a disorder called diabetes insipidus. So not the sugar kind of diabetes. It's around sodium, and so someone in the audience said, "Hey, have you seen this girl's going to do this long bike ride? What do you think about that?" And the doctor said, "Well, if I was her practicing physician, I would say no, she shouldn't do it."
Did
And
he know you were in the audience?
he did know I was. I believe he knew I was in the audience. And then that's the moment I said, challenge accepted.
Yes. And so you had to really watch that then your sodium intake, your water intake, like you said, through the race. When you got to the race, did you race that alone or was that I mean, it was a tour, but did you know people that you were kind of, you know, drafting off each other and working that whole thing? Or how did that work when you actually got race time?
Yeah, so I signed up for what was called a semi-supported tour. So there was 10 of us that essentially hired a van to haul our gear from town to town. I wanted to be on my bike. I didn't want to be on a touring bike. So I knew I wanted to be on I call her Moxie. Um,
Hmm.
and I wanted to take Moxie with me. And so I had someone else haul my my tent and all my camping gear and whatever clothes I needed. And so there were 10 of us doing that, and we didn't know each other before the event. And that was, I thought it would be easier because I had to get injections throughout this tour. So that was another thing I had to figure out. And I had no idea how my body was going to respond. It's one thing to have a weekly training schedule, and it's another thing to bike 55 to 75 miles a day for 41 days.
Wow.
And so I had no idea how my body would respond. And the medications I had to take were very complex. So I had to make sure they got shipped to these certain locations that I would be at on certain days. I had to make sure they understood how to handle the medication and then how to administer it. And not all doctors, but a lot of doctors have egos and they don't want someone telling them how to do something.
We saw that earlier in our story, right? Where you were trying to figure out what was wrong. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so there were just, yeah, a lot of, I thought having this van, hauling my gear was going to be easier and that I'd be with other people. And there were challenges in that as well. But I did settle into a groove, and most days I'd maybe ride with two other people, and we'd take turns drafting. I think once people learned more about my story, they wanted to really support me. And I talk about this in my book, where I went into it like, no, I'm doing this on my own. I don't want anyone to help me, and I just want to, it's a soul healing journey for me. Everyone leave me alone. To at the end of the ride being so sad it was over and parting ways with these people. And I had to learn to really let them in and support me throughout this journey. And that's why The Road Unpaved became the title, because the being on the road really became that metaphor for life for me.
Wow. And is there an overarching theme of the book, Rissa? Like, is there a major lesson or takeaway that you express throughout the book, or is it kind of the overall the journey and you're walking through it A to Z?
Yeah, I think it continues to blossom. And if you asked me when I first wrote it, when it first came out last year, I would have said, don't limit yourself. Sometimes it's just a matter of shifting perspective and opening up to possibilities. And so don't limit yourself. Don't let anyone else limit you either. But man, oh man, when I started hearing from people all over the world, they give me all kinds of snippets that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, that's really cool. And I don't know if it's because I'm so immersed in it, and I'm a very real, authentic person. I'm this what you see is what you get. And so to me, I'm just being me. I'm just operating in this world the way that feels in alignment for me. And so when other people are like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah."
That's so cool. One thing that you just shared prior to my last question that I found really amazing is how you talked about your soul healing, right? That you wanted to do it on your own and kind of left on this is soul work I got to do. And what I've found or am finding as I'm on my journey is that my soul gets filled with other people when I do let them in. And that is part of my joy and part of my soul being lifted in any kind of healing or endeavor. So to hear that you got that kind of a gift through this ride is really impressive and cool for me to hear.
Oh my gosh, yes, I love hearing that. I want to cry. It's really, I mean, I discovered that deep connection's actually one of my top values. So why was I depriving myself of that for so long? And
Yes.
it truly was a gift.
And
Yes.
how do you now take that the where I love post-diagnosis Rissa and where she's gone and the things that you've now taken in. How are you applying that to making a difference in people's lives today? I know that you're doing speaking and you're doing coaching and helping people with businesses and stuff. I want you to share with our audience exactly what you do now, because obviously you got here, you wouldn't have gotten to where you are to help people had you not had to go through what you had to go through to help yourself and fill your soul up. So share with us your journey on what you're doing now moving forward.
Yes. Well, as I was saying, I was just being me, and I was planning to head out on this bike journey because I felt it was something I had to do for me. And suddenly, some doctors and organizations and pharmaceutical companies caught wind of it. And they were like, "You're doing what? And you have what?" And suddenly I'm being told, "Oh my gosh, your story is so inspiring. You're an inspiration. You're making such a difference in people's lives." And I was like, "Me? This awkward girl who loves her bike, who's floundering through life? Like what?" And so I started speaking on stages and um, for pharmaceutical companies and medical professionals, and really starting to bring out the information and awareness around doctor patient relationships. And I love that so much. And then furthermore, through my own healing, I started learning that I was a natural healer as well, and um, finished my certification in Gestalt, got a certificate in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and started seeing clients of my own and helping them through their own healing journey. And man, oh man, I just love this version of Rissa way better than the one pre-diagnosis.
I love that. What a great story. Rissa, there's people watching this right now that they're going to be inspired. They're going to be like, "Wow, if she got through that and was able to do the things that she's been able to do, what can I do? What should I do?" If people want to hear more about your story, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want you to work with them, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes, you can learn all about me and what I offer and what I'm doing on risaaugust.com. It's Risa August, just like the month.com.
Awesome. And I'll tell you what, if I could offer one thing to people watching or listening, it would be to notice when Rissa talks that she used the term authentic a couple of times. It is authentic. It's not coming from a place of either superiority or inferiority, not poor me or look what I've done. It's just coming from heart. And that is the place when we can operate from that place. Just again, my experience, when I'm truly operating from in the moment, who I am to be the best version for the people that I'm with, it makes all the difference in the world. So I hope I can't believe you wouldn't sense that from Rissa, but watch it. And then once you've seen this, you might want to watch it again. You also might want to share it. So Rissa, thank you so much. I want to ask you one more question, and it's this. Through all of this and all the people in your life and whatever you've come to learn and to know, is there one piece of advice that you've been given or one piece of knowledge that you've learned that you would want to pass on as being fundamental and foundational in who you are and how to live a great life right now?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Instead of focusing on what you can't do, start like refocus on what you can do.
Yes. And one more time, give them the mantra, the can mantra.
Capable, able, now.
Capable, able now. Rissa, this has been such a treat for me, such a joy. Thank you for that and for sharing capable, able, and now with all of us. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to use that in my life today and every day. So I appreciate it. We wish you the best in your books, in your speaking. Hopefully, people, if you need to get a hold of Rissa and you want to talk with her, please do that. Rissa, in the meantime, thank you for making a difference. This has been a true treat for me.
Oh, what a pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Jim.
Absolutely. So, for you watching this, again, if you've enjoyed it, share it. If you have things that you'd like us to talk about, guests you'd like to have on, that kind of thing, let me know. You can email me, jim@ramoslaw.com, and I will absolutely get back with you and we'll find some things to talk about to make this show even better. If you have other questions, you can reach out to us as well. In the meantime, get out there, enjoy this day, and keep making a difference.